The corn Form B is the form used to document the field counts for the corn units. For good samples, a completed Form B is expected each month until the units are harvested. The corn Form B is the same as last year. It is only 2 pages long, but there are many things to cover, from row space measurements to stage of maturity to detailed measurements of 5 specific years to stalk and ear counts to harvest procedures. Your safety is the highest priority. Do not enter a field if it has been recently sprayed with organophosphorus pesticides. Please see the interviewer's manual for more information. Unit location was discussed earlier. That discussion ended with the pace count into the field. Once you have taken the last pace, lay a dowel rod or yardstick across the rows to indicate the beginning of the unit. The unit consists of a 5-foot buffer zone plus the count area, which is 15 feet long. So for corn, the entire unit is 20 feet long. The 50-foot tape is used to measure the entire unit. 1 stake is placed at the start of the buffer zone. 1 stake is placed at the end of the buffer zone at the 5-foot mark, and 1 stake is placed at the end of the count area at the 20-foot mark. The stake at the beginning of the buffer zone should be marked with the sample number and the unit number. The stake at the end of the buffer zone, which is also at the beginning of the count area, should be marked with the sample number, unit number, and row number. Flagging ribbon should be placed on the first and last stalks in the 15-foot count area of each row. Many times, stakes disappear, so it is very important to mark the first and last stalks in the 15-foot count area with ribbon. What to do if the stalk is exactly at the 5-foot mark, which is at the beginning of the count area, or if a stalk is exactly at the 20-foot mark, which is the end of the count area. Well, include the stalk if it emerges at the 5-foot mark, but exclude the stalk if it emerges at the 20-foot mark. Please see the interviewer's manual for more specific instructions on how to lay out a corn unit. Item 2 on the corn Form B will equal 1 for both units for the first visit to the field. For subsequent visits, the unit location code will be 3 most of the time. Code 2 is only used when the unit was previously laid out, but the unit had to be relayed out because the original unit could not be found. This should be rare, assuming the unit was properly marked with flagging ribbon and a sketch of where the unit is located was drawn on the kit envelope. Row space measurements are only taken when laying out a unit. Row space measurements are not to be taken when the unit location code equals 3. Let's assume this is Unit 1. The row 1 to row 2 row space measurement is taken as shown. This measurement is entered in item 3L, cell 303. The 50-foot tape measure is shown in feet and tenths of feet, not feet and inches. Please see that item 3 on the corn Form B is also formatted in feet and tenths of feet. Again, let's assume this is Unit 1. The row 1 to row 5 row space measurement is taken as shown. Please notice that the measurement is taken across 4 row middles. This measurement is entered in item 3B on the Form B, cell 305. By far, the most common row spacing for corn is 30 inches. As a result, many row space measurements are 2.5 for row 1 to row 2 and 10.0 for row 1 to row 5. As you are taking these measurements, please make sure you measure going perpendicular to the rows. If you measure at an angle, the measurement will be wrong. A suspicious row space measurement would be 2.5 for row 1 to row 2 and 12.5 for row 1 to row 5. In this case, it appears as though the row 1 to row 5 measurement was taken from row 1 to row 6. If the field was planted in 30-inch rows, it is okay if the row spacings are 2.4 and 9.9 or 2.6 and 10.1 or something similar. However, if the row space measurements are odd in any way, please submit a note justifying the measurements. Corn is intended to be planted with consistent row spacing. Treat twin rows as a single row. This is because each set of twin rows will go into the same row on the corn header at harvest. Please enter a note in CAPI that the field is planted in twin rows. Based on the month, husk the first 5 ears beyond the unit to determine the maturity code for the sample for this visit. So, for the September 1 survey, which is the August 25th to September 1st work period, husk the first 5 ears beyond row 1 of Unit 1. Please reference the interviewer's manual for details on the 2B rule. This illustrates where the 5 ears used to determine maturity are located for the September 1 survey. If ears and silked ear shoots are not yet present, which should be rare, check the box on the Form B in the Designated Measurement Areas section of the Form B and complete Item 9 only. If no ears and silked ear shoots are present, then Item 9 on the back page of the Form B is the only item that applies. Use the colored corn brochure to help determine maturity. If the ear is between 2 stages of maturity, use the lower code. In this example, ears 1, 2, 4, and 5 are code 3, and ear 3 is code 2. So, item 4, cell 301, equals 14. Complete items 4A through 4D based on cell 301. In this example, 4A is no, so you are directed to 4B. 4B is no, so you are directed to 4C. 4C is no, so you are directed to 4D. 4D is yes, so items 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12 on the back of the Form B must be completed. Once it is determined what items need to be completed, please circle those items. It is vital that the correct items are completed. Errors are generated if items are completed that shouldn't have been, and vice versa. In this same example, ear 3 was code 2. For items 5 through 7, this ear must be replaced by the next code 3 or higher ear. This ear might be the 6th ear, or the 7th ear, etc. This code 3 or higher ear becomes the 3rd ear for items 5 through 7. Take your time and measure each ear very carefully. Please see the implied decimal point for items 6 and 7. If a kernel row length is an even inch, such as 4 inches or 5 inches, then the entry in item 6 must be 4.0 or 5.0, etc. For the diameter of the ear, if the measurement is 46 millimeters, for example, then the entry in item 7 is 46.0. Since item 6 on the Form B must be inches and tenths, use the small tape measure, which is formatted the same way. This is an example of a difficult ear to measure, so do your best to choose an average kernel row and measure it. For item 7, it is important to use the caliper correctly. Place the caliper 1 inch up from the bottom of the ear and read the caliper while it is in this position. Please see that item 7 on the corn Form B is millimeters and tenths. The caliper reading in this example is 47.7. Notice the red arrow pointing to 40, so we know the caliper reading is between 40.0 and 50.0. The dial is pointing towards 7.7, so the overall reading is 47.7, which is what should be entered for that ear in item 7. If the dial points directly at 0, then the caliper reading will be 30.0, 40.0, 50.0, etc. Make sure to use the decimal point. Also, an error is generated if the caliper measurement is less than 20.0 millimeters. So if you enter a caliper measurement less than 20.0, please double check the measurement. If it is valid, then the ear is likely extremely small and it probably has very few kernels. Also, a note is required if the caliper measurement is less than 20.0. If you are required to complete item 8 on the Form B based on the answers to items 4A through 4D, then mark the yes/no box in item 8. This yes/no box is determined by the maturity codes in item 5. For example, if 2 of the 5 ears in item 5 are code 6 and the other 3 are code 5 or lower, then item 8 is no and you skip to item 9. If 3 or more of the 5 ears in item 5 are code 6 or 7, then item 8 is yes and the dent harvest should be completed. Please see the instructions on the Form B and the interviewer's manual for dent harvest procedures. Step 6 in item 8 should be checked when the dent harvest has been completed. When counting stocks, item 9, please document any special circumstances on the Form B. This will be helpful when you revisit the unit next month. Use flagging ribbon to tie tillers to the main stock. For subsequent visits, refer to the previous month's Form B to make sure rows and units are not switched. Here is an example of volunteer stocks in the row 2 middle. If these are truly stocks and not tillers, then they should be tied off and counted as stocks. Tillers should not be counted as stocks. Consider taking a picture of this situation to refer to in subsequent months. After the number of stocks are determined, item 9, then count the number of those item 9 stocks that have at least 1 ear or silk deer shoot. This number absolutely can't be greater than the number of stocks for that row. It is okay to mark on the Form B which stock or stocks, if any, don't have an ear or silk deer shoot. Example, item 9 equals 27 and item 10 equals 25 for a given row. It is okay to write on the Form B that stocks 7 and 12, for example, are the ones without an ear. Any notes you write on the Form B will help you fill out next month's Form B. Item 11 is the total count of all ears and silk deer shoots on all stocks in the 15-foot count area. This number will equal or exceed the item 10 count. It is okay to make a note on the Form B which stocks, if any, have multiple ears or silk deer shoots. Silk deer shoots often dry up later in the growing season and may not be present the next month. Item 12 can't exceed item 11. This is because the item 12 count is ears with evidence of kernel formation. Silk deer shoots are not counted in item 12. Husk and examine a similar ear outside the unit if you need help determining kernel formation. If you are directed to complete items 13 through 15, item 4A or 4B is yes, then this visit will be your final visit. No more Form Bs will be completed and the status code will be 4. The Form B and the interviewer's manual contain instructions on how to conduct a final visit. The 3rd and 4th ears of each unit must be sent to the lab in separate plastic bags. The weight of all ears in row 1 of each unit is entered in item 14. Make sure your scale is set to pounds and hundredths, not pounds and ounces. Please note that cell 361 absolutely must equal cell 312, and cell 363 must equal cell 313. We have a few cases each year where this isn't the case. You will be contacted if you submit a Form B where cell 361 does not equal 312, or where cell 363 does not equal 313. If we are allowed to have many schools in the fall, harvest procedures will be covered in more detail then. Anytime a sample is sent to the lab in St. Louis, please document the UPS tracking number. Please submit comments in CAPI. Also, please fill out the Form B completely. Yes, no questions, the NUM number, etc., even though the data is submitted on CAPI. The date on the Form B is when the field work was done. For samples sent to the lab, this date will match the date entered on the ID cards. Again, refer to the previous month's Form B when completing the current month's form. As was mentioned earlier, a caliper measurement of less than 20.0 millimeters will generate an error. Headquarters will override that error if proper documentation is provided. Other errors include very wide or narrow row space measurements and very high or low stock counts. If any count is unusual, please feel free to take a picture of it and email it to your supervisor, your NASDA coordinator, and the Objective Yield Survey stat. If you have stock counts in the teens or in the 30s, please document that as best you can. Maybe the sprayer took out some stocks, or maybe you accidentally counted stocks in the buffer zone. Any comments you submit are appreciated. Please feel free to reach out to your supervisor, your NASDA coordinator, or survey stat if you have any questions. Each unit is unique, and often there are unusual circumstances that a PowerPoint presentation or the interviewer's manual doesn't cover. Thank you, and please stay safe.